Hello, everyone. Welcome to another mini episode of the Dugout podcast. I am so excited to talk about today's revolutionary because she is so amazing. I think she is a North Star for so many people. Nonetheless, there are so many complex things to say about her. Her name is Assata Shakur, born July 16th, 1947, which also means she's a Cancer just like me, and we also have similar names. Assata Shakur is a revolutionary previously affiliated with the Black Liberation Army. In 1977, Assata Shakur received a conviction for the first-degree murder of State Trooper Werner Forster following a confrontation on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973. Assata Shakur managed to escape from prison in 1979 and is presently sought by the FBI. And a few basics about her biography is that she was born in Flushing, Queens. She grew up in New York City and in Wilmington, North Carolina. She eventually attended college and eventually got into a lot of organizing while in university. I think she was arrested for the first time while she was in university doing a protest against her administration. She would then move on to become radicalized by her time in California, and she would become involved with the Black Panther Party, and then notably move on to be a major part of the Black Liberation Army. And some more specific background about her Black Panther Party experience is that she led a Harlem Black Panther Party chapter where she did all sorts of survival programs, and throughout her time there, she was often at odds with some of the machismo and hyper-militancy of the Black Panther Party. And as someone who is definitely connected to Black nationalism, African nationalism, she changed her name to Assata Shakur when she was in her 20s. So this sense of internationalism and connection to the Black diaspora was really important to her. And this was something that the Black Panther Party was known to be against. They would often take down cultural artifacts from Africa or discourage members of the Black Panther Party from wearing African garb because they were into such an aesthetic and hyper-militance that it felt necessary as a party to kind of create this uniform and to create this sort of militant structure to help people become a part of the vanguard, to help people enter a revolutionary process. And so many times throughout the party, Assata Shakur felt at odds with the machismo and this aversion to a diasporic Blackness, because from her perspective, understanding international struggles and not pigeonholing ourselves in would be of benefit to revolutionaries. So that was another aspect of her biography that I felt was really important to mention. And to put this in context, I will actually play a small clip from Judas and the Black Messiah, which we have notably reviewed on the first episode of this podcast about propaganda and representations of radical movements in Hollywood. So listen to this clip and we will return right back.
I don't need no mic. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. Dr. Charles Hurst, direct from Howard. Right on. So what? You think the students over there are gonna be free now? Oh, they'll let you change the name of your college or your own name. Throw on a dashiki. Because guess what? They still gonna drag your black ass to Vietnam to shoot a pole rice farm and get shot your damn self. That's the difference between revolution and the candy-coated facade of gradual reform. Reform is just the masters teaching the slaves how to be better slaves. Under reform, you can take the motherfucking masters out and the slaves still be doing all the work for them. There's a man called a capitalist. Don't matter what color he is, black, white, brown, red, don't matter. Because the capitalist has one goal, and that is to exploit the people. He can have on a three-piece suit or a dashiki, because political power doesn't flow from a sleeve of a dashiki. Political power flows from the barrel of a gun. We in the Black Panther Party don't believe in no culture except revolutionary culture. What we mean by that is a culture that will free you. Don't give me no five and dime costume of a medicine man or a witch doctor or whatever you think the motherland look like. Give me the righteous flags of a Mozambican Frelimo fighter. Give me an AK-47 or some bandoliers that they got in Angola. Give me some Colt 45s of the folks that are trying to free themselves. Brother, the dashiki ain't gonna help you when they come up in here with them tanks like they did in Henry Hole. You need tools, brother. We got the tools in 75th Americans.
And another aspect of Assata Shakur's biography that I think is really cool is that she was involved in various expropriations with other Black Liberation Army members and other revolutionary groups. And expropriation in the context of the Black Liberation Army mainly refers to the seizure or appropriation of resources, often through militant means, for the purpose of funding revolutionary activities aimed at achieving Black liberation and combating systemic oppression. For the Black Liberation Army, appropriation could involve actions such as bank robberies, hijackings, or other forms of theft or confiscation targeting institutions or individuals perceived as oppressive or exploitative. The resources obtained through expropriation could then be used to support the BLA's revolutionary goals, including funding their operations, providing for their members, and advancing their broader agenda of challenging racial inequality and fighting for Black autonomy. The notion of expropriation is really important to think about when we're looking at figures like Assata Shakur and other Black Liberation Army members, is because when we look at the late 60s and 70s and these breaks with the more nonviolent direct action strategies of the civil rights movement, we see a very drastic turn towards trying to change our material conditions as Black people through the appropriation of resources, through building these survival programs, through building institutions that have the capacity to perform self-defense and to be antagonistic to state powers. I think this is a very different approach from what Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement and a more nonviolent direct action strategy tactic is pushing for, because those tactics are still dependent upon state powers determining our rights, state powers dictating when we are given things and when we are not. And it's about and I think a more nonviolent direct action strategy is dependent upon the consciousness of the masses understanding why revolutionary action is necessary. And to me, what I really respect about what the BLA represents, aside from many of the critiques about them in terms of how they targeted different communities that were drug users and beyond, I think they're a really daring example of how do Black revolutionaries go underground and perform the work that is necessary to exercise a Black autonomy or to exercise ways of being antagonistic towards the state. But for now, I want to move on to some of the notable things that Assata Shakur is known for. I mean, we just mentioned expropriation, and she notably escaped to Cuba after she got out of prison in 1979. And a lot of reports say that the Weather Underground helped her. We did a mini episode about Kawasi Balagoon, and one of the things that I've learned about him over the years is that he is alleged to be one of the people that was there to help Assata Shakur escape jail along with BLA members and Weather Underground members, because Kawasi Balagoon himself was a member of the Black Liberation Army. Another notable thing about Assata Shakur that I think is really, really important to remember is how the FBI and state governments work to make her a scapegoat for the Black Power movement, the Black Liberation Army. She writes very much in her book about how when the FBI was coming after her, they titled her the mother hen of the Black Liberation Army. And what I think is really important to note at the time is that Assata Shakur had many critiques of the Black Panther Party. She eventually left the Black Panther Party, but if we even look at the Black Panther Party as a litmus test for how counterinsurgency worked during the time, the CIA and the FBI worked very much on COINTELPRO in order to sow dissent between different Black radicals, Black nationalists, and Black revolutionaries. They would send fake letters to people. They would put out hits on people and blame other members of the Black Panther Party or Black Liberation Army. And so to create a whole state campaign to target a particular individual, to say that they are a leader of a movement, it is essentially the state fabricating charges, fabricating all sorts of things, hyperbolizing a person's role in a movement in order to make a martyr that is identifiable to them. But the mistake that comes out of these situations, like we can see with Huey P. Newton or Assata Shakur or even Angela Davis, is that during this time period when you would send people to jail, yes, it would exacerbate the movements and force people to fundraise and shift the trajectory of what these organizations were doing outside of self-defense and survival programs. but it would kind of consciousness raise around the state's power to arbitrarily pick people in a movement and say, you did this, you did that, you're the mother hen, you're the leader. And so it's a very clear example of the insidiousness of counterinsurgency and how media plays into this. I mean, yes, the media was saying that she was the mother hen. The media was corroborating police and the state's information and putting that out into newspapers and swaying mass public opinion. And the reason that I mention media and the role of counterinsurgency is because, as a revolutionary artist myself, I really do believe that media and the arts are the battlegrounds for which future generations will understand history. And I have taught Assata Shakur's biography before, and one of the main kind of angles that I encourage my students to read her book through is through this notion of gendered revolutionary and radical literature. And what I mean by that is that when we look back at this time period, whether it be the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement, and we look at the Black women that wrote things and the Black men that wrote things, there are common threads throughout their literature. Among the Black men, there is always some kind of exploration of how sexuality is a vehicle for us being liberated, and this is why men have to be horny. There's usually some mention of domestic violence. There's usually some mention of having to fight people off in your neighborhood and needing to be tough. There's usually some admiration of other Black male radical figure. There are all these sort of juicy, tantalizing, thrilling descriptions of them fighting the cops and being so strong. And there is a real erasure of, I think, the deeper emotional impacts of what revolutionary and radical work can do and what state repression can lead to on an emotional level, how it can damage people psychologically. When you look at the radical literature written by women of this era, whether it be Elaine Brown or Angela Davis or Assata Shakur or so many others, you see their own individual and systemic confrontations with misogyny, with misogynoir, with machismo, with hypermilitarism, with how so many men in the Black Panther Party and the Black Power movement were so fixated on presenting a certain kind of aesthetic, they often skipped over the intrapersonal work or the emotional work that was needed to actually be a part of a community that has the capacity to go against the state. And there are so many places that are in Assata Shakur's biography that really exemplify this. But I want to read one section in particular. This is around page 212, and I'm going to read this section and we're going to come back and talk about Assata Shakur a little bit more. I hope none of you could hear the construction on my street. There's a lot of fucking construction. There's men in my backyard. Okay, whatever. Assata Shakur's biography reads, with a few exceptions, PE classes for the Black Panther members turned out to be just the opposite. We reviewed articles from the Black Panther Party paper, read passages from Mao's Red Book, and discussed certain speeches and articles by various Black Panther Party members. Most of the time, whoever was giving the class discussed whatever we were studying and explained it, but without giving the underlying issues or putting it into any historical context. The basic problem was not whether the teacher was good or bad. The basic problem stemmed from the fact that the Black Panther Party had no systemic approach to political education. They were reading the Red Book, but didn't know who Harriet Tubman, Marcus Garvey, and Nat Turner were. They talked about intercommunalism, but still really believed that the Civil War was fought to free the slaves. A whole lot of them barely understood any kind of history, Black, African, or otherwise. Huey Newton had written that politics was war without bloodshed, and that war was politics without bloodshed. To a lot of Panthers, however, struggle consisted of only two aspects: picking up the gun and serving the people. That was the main reason many party members, in my opinion, underestimated the need to unite with other Black organizations and to struggle against various community issues. A lot of the sisters and brothers had joined because they were sick and tired of the oppression they had been suffering. Most of them had never been in the struggle before. Quite a few joined thinking the party was going to issue them a gun and direct them to go out and shoot pigs. Most of these brothers and sisters had attended inferior schools which taught them either lies or nothing at all. Education of every kind was sorely needed. Without an adequate education program, many Panthers fell into a Roboton bag. They repeated slogans and phrases without understanding their own complete meaning, often resulting in dogmatic and short-sighted practices. For example, one day an African brother who was working with one of the African liberation movements came into the office and gave us a beautiful calendar put out by one of the African liberation groups. It was bad. It had beautiful pictures of African freedom fighters and said something like international support for African liberation. The first thing I did was hang it up. When I came to the office the next day, the calendar was down. When I asked what happened to it, they said, the calendar said international, and we're not internationalists, we're intercommunalists. And once again, reading this excerpt is so fascinating to me, and I've been returning to this thought and framework so much lately, is that it's important to not only understand the significance of revolutionary figures and people of political or cultural relevance, but it is so important to understand them, to read how they viewed the context of their time, because even reading that, I get to understand distinctions in machismo and hypermilitancy and aesthetics and having content within a revolutionary process that goes against the sort of more romantic parts of the revolutionary process. And I think it's so telling and moving and powerful to have these beautiful radical images of the Black Panther Party alongside these archival texts, these texts from this time period that bring us into the specifics of this party. And I think Assata Shakur is so incisive and right in thinking about these things and writing about them in this way. And it really sets her apart as a revolutionary that could understand the contradictions in what was happening and built out a process of exposing those. And a lot of these issues, among many other things like the division of labor in the party, how hierarchical it was, a lot of that led Assata Shakur eventually to leave and to pursue the Black Liberation Army because their structure served her revolutionary goals and trajectory much more. And I want to end this mini episode kind of thinking about what Assata Shakur represents in terms of the different trajectories that revolutionaries can take. We can see people like Angela Davis. These are modern, contemporary Black revolutionaries, radicals, or so they claim, no matter what your critiques of them are. But this is how they place themselves in the status quo in mainstream politics. And so I do think it's interesting, the above ground and underground trajectories of revolutionaries. And a part of what I like to confront in my art and writing generally, like even within myself, is how do we confront the fear of this work? How do we confront the violence of this work? And how do we live long, beautiful, happy, healthy lives under all these systems that constantly remind us that we are less than human? Assata Shakur had to sacrifice a lot in the end. I mean, she's still alive. She's still in Cuba. I'm sure she's doing amazing radical work there. But I can say for myself, writing from the perspective of being an immigrant and having many men in my family sell drugs, deal drugs, do all these things that were subversive, but for different reasons, there is this strange aftermath that the children of these revolutionaries have to experience. And this question of legacy, I think, is so interesting and important when we're looking at the meaning of our revolutionary lives, the meaning of our lives under capitalism, because as a revolutionary, in some ways, we are devoted to a longer form collective legacy, but we detach ourselves from these more individual and familial and biological legacies. And that sense of devotion, of giving up one kind of love or one kind of commitment for another, is so fascinating to me. And I want to leave us with the question, what kind of trajectory do you wish to have as a revolutionary? And what does Assata Shakur's example teach you about the trajectory of revolutionaries in general? I hope you enjoyed this mini episode of the podcast. Please comment below with any new things that you learned about Assata Shakur and give us some suggestions for future podcast mini episode ideas. We've been enjoying doing these. They're bite-sized. We also accompany readings, so check those out in the show notes. And please consider supporting us on Substack, where we publish all of these episodes and the show notes in fuller detail. And if you want to support us, you can pay on Substack to support our podcast for a few dollars a month. This is going to help us greatly in the long run because we record, research, edit all for free. And we do it out of love and out of revolutionary desire, but any kind of support would be great. So till next time, see you later.